So, good morning. Can you all hear me well? Okay, sorry. I just woke someone up? No? Okay, good. Sorry for the short delay, but we had some video connection issues, but we got it fixed in less than 4 minutes, so I think that's pretty good. And it somehow fits my topic, disaster recovery. First of all, thank you for being here. I'm pretty happy myself for speaking again this year. I was here last year talking about Office 365, and in the meantime shifted even more to Hyper-V, Azure, where disaster recovery can be quite important and even quite challenging. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to talk about this topic. Just for my own knowledge, who is using Hyper-V as a prime hypervisor for his own environment or customers? Okay, good. Who's already using Azure? Okay. Who's still using VMware? Not that long anymore. So, disaster recovery, Hyper-V, Azure will be the prime topics of this session. Now, 60 minutes is actually a bit too short for a few reasons. First of all, disaster recovery is a very important topic to talk about. And second one, there are quite a lot of possible demos. I'm saying possible demos because I had some disaster and recovery to do myself, but more on that later on. But even I'm going to hope to give you a good overview of what is possible by using Azure regarding disaster recovery. How can Azure help me in building my, and Mike can be you as a partner, can be you as the IT guy within your company. How can I build my disaster recovery plan? Because that's where it starts. You have to think about something. How can I make sure that my servers keep up and running, that my applications are running? So that's actually the first introduction, just a couple of slides. What is for me, and bringing the message to you, what is disaster recovery? Second one is, once we know what disaster recovery means, what is the Microsoft solution? And it's actually a couple of different things. But you already know Hyper-V can help you, Azure can help you, and everything in between can most probably help you. And then the last one, a bit like the prime topic, it's Azure Site Recovery Manager, which by the name itself should already be pretty clear. It's helping you in creating a recovery and doing management around it. So the main three topics. A couple of words about myself, for giving you some feedback who this fellow on stage is. Don't worry too much about the icons at the bottom. I mean, it's important, but the bottom line is I'm a Microsoft guy. In short, I know nothing else but Microsoft. Started with Exchange in '96, then did quite a lot of Exchange, really in-depth, and then with Office 365, like 4 years ago, Exchange business went down, and I shifted to Office 365, and then, from a consulting perspective, a typical migration, I mean, I'm from Belgium, so, I wouldn't even say it's a really SMB market, but a typical organization has, on average, 500 users. So an Exchange migration took me 20 days on average, Office 365 only 4 days, which means, I had to do 5 times more business. But then thanks to Hyper-V and Azure, my business came back. I'm currently working as an external one for Sogeti, helping them in actually building their Microsoft solution stack. For the ones who know Sogeti as a company, it's pretty big, it's a worldwide group, but their background lies more in data center and data center outsourcing. So they have quite a lot of customers actually taking over their environments and doing remote management and migrating the on-premise machines, assets, into the Sogeti data center. Now that was pretty good business for a couple of years. But then again, with public cloud and mainly Azure, they had some challenges as well. So I'm helping them for a couple of months now. Also taking the alliance responsibility in Belgium, so just getting the connection with Microsoft Live. Next to that, community is pretty important to me. I like interaction with IT pros, with developers, although I don't know anything about development. But that's why the yellow pants, you'll probably We'll learn a bit more about them during the next couple of days. It's a little community around IT Pro, around Microsoft certification, and based on the flyer you all got, you can win some prizes as well. But you have to be a bit more active than you're now. But don't worry, I'll get it out of you. One of the last things I did outside of my day-to-day job is writing a book on Hyper-V. It's actually a walkthrough from the standalone Hyper-V to clustering to integration with Azure, migrating virtual machines in Virtual Machine Manager, migrating away from VMware. And disaster recovery is just a small top on it. Just know that you can win a copy of the book when asking questions during my session. So that's the marketing stuff, right? What is disaster recovery? Think of an easy example. The lights go out. Not sure if you can simulate the lights going down, but you already know that they are going down, so it's not that scary anymore. But just in general, when the lights go down, whenever, I mean, in the office, at home, when attending a conference, I mean, I would even be scared if electricity would go down right now. So in general, something goes wrong, that's panic. You all agree? Yes. But there's a solution. So the disaster is no electricity or the lights go down, and the solution is we have a light switch. And hopefully we still have power, which is a bit challenging in Belgium. Maybe you heard something on that in the news. But now the solution is we have the light switch, we turn it on, and hooray, light is back up and running. So that's disaster recovery. And everybody is, again, wow, cool. Lights are back on, so relax. You all feel relaxed again? Yeah, because the lights are still up, right? So that's disaster recovery. Easy peasy, no questions? No? Okay, thank you. I think you understand everything around disaster recovery now. No, because we have a 60-minute session, not a 5-6-minute session. And it's not that simple. We're talking about IT assets, we're talking about end users, we're talking about systems, applications, on-premise, in the cloud, maybe at some hosting company, somewhere in the world. And it's all coming together. Disaster recovery is not that easy. And even if everything else fails, there's a WBW. And now I see some faces like, what's the guy talking about? WBW. Wake by wife. What does that mean? I'll tell you my story. My demo machine, my physical Hyper-V box, decided to crash 2 days ago. The crash was, well, actually pretty stupid. I don't know what happened. I restarted the box and it gave some fluffy error message about a disk issue. So I replaced the disk. Well, first yesterday morning went to the shop, buying a new disk, firing up the machine, and everything was working. Why? Because I had a RAID controller in the machine. So replicating the disk data, firing up the machine, everything is up and running. Close to 2 hours and a half later, the machine got down again. Firing it up, everything is up and running. 3 hours later, bam, the machine goes down again. So again, what happened this morning, I had to call my wife at home, asking, hey, can you go down in the basement and try to fire up the machine again? So that's the WBW for me. True story, by the way. We're not talking about home environments or smaller environments. We're talking about enterprise, IT, disaster recovery. Now, when you talk about disaster recovery, or think about how we, as IT guys, handle disaster recovery in the past, in short, it's pretty complex. It's challenging. I mean, think about, and this is just an easy scheme, but for example, you have one data center. So one of the things we built in the past is creating clusters. Anyone installed clusters on NT4? Yeah? Who dares to say he's on the right age for having experience with NT4? I am, so don't mind. NT4 and clustering, it wasn't that easy. Setting up the cluster, pretty challenging. Making sure that applications were cluster aware, pretty challenging. But that's all fine, it's in your own data center. And then, pretty obvious, you want to make sure that when your building blows up, when your data center blows up, that there's something aside in another data center. And then we had some other challenges. Your application is running on data center 1. And then you want to make sure that some application, being a SQL, Exchange, whatever application you're using, needs to be up and running in the second data center. And then the up and running, yeah, it depends a bit on what you as a partner, what you as an IT guy understood as up and running. But in the end, it's still pretty complex. Even think about, for example, on the slide, geo-load balancing, because having the application up and running is one thing, but 2 data centers, one IP subnet on one side, one IP subnet on the other side, by using whatever mechanism, and we got like tons of different applications, even on top of Microsoft, that could actually help you in disaster recovery. Think of vMotion, think of virtual machine replication by using some third-party product. The VM is moving, the VM is starting up on the other side, but it has an IP from the left side. And then you have to run some scripts to make sure that it's up and running on the right side. So it's all pretty challenging, pretty complex. Even thinking about storage replication, that was the next booming business thing like 5-6 years ago. As a storage vendor, I have my storage box on one side. So my dear customer, can you please buy a second copy of that box? And we'll make sure that we can copy over the bits and bytes, not on application level, but on storage level. Anyone using that? Pretty expensive. Anyone selling it? No? Yeah, you must be. You're probably pretty shy now. Think about active-passive. Think about connection failover. I mean, it's all, in the end, pretty complex. Is it effective? Yes. Solutions work perfectly in most cases. Maybe 99.9, I don't know. They were always working. But in the end, pretty expensive. Now, the main challenge customers have nowadays is cost. Why is public cloud so booming business? Because it costs nothing. Well, nothing is a bit too exaggerated, but it's very easy to install a few remote machines in some data center, where the data center is, for example, Azure. Even my own demo setup on the non-physical Hyper-V machine, it cost me close to €100 a month, and I'm running 13 servers. Hey, how is that possible? 13 servers for €100? Yeah, because I'm not using them. They're just there, and when I need them, I start them up. I know that's not a real typical business case, but even in disaster recovery, that could already be something. You already have some copy aside for just a few bucks of euro. A bit more about the challenges. So face it, you have your data center and your users. Users working in the same basement or in the offices, on-premise users. And you also have remote users. And they are connecting to your prime data center, where your file servers are, your Exchange servers are, accounting applications, and whatever application you can think of. And then you start thinking about, but if something goes wrong with my data center, I want to make sure that I have my systems, my data, somewhere available on an external disaster recovery site. And it's working in whatever way. It's replicating data on virtual machine level, it's replicating data on storage level. Even having a guy taking backups on one side, driving with his car to the data center and doing the restore of the VMs, and then, that's also disaster recovery. It's not the best solution, but it's working. Now imagine that on your prime data center, one of your applications, one of your machines goes down. Your end users are connecting, no problem. External users, hey, reconnect to the other copy. Think of DNS updates you have to do. Don't connect to application site1.company.com, but application URL site2.company.com. Easiest disaster recovery you can think of. Yes, there is some downtime for the user. His application is not reachable, but try again after 15 minutes and it will be online again. Even for the internal ones, DNS updates replication, no problem. Now what happens if your full data center goes down? Where your DNS server, for example, is running inside your environment, it's a bit more challenging. No problem, we have our copy, we do redirection, on-premise users to the remote data center, remote users reconnecting to the data center. And in some cases, we do recovery, everybody's back on the prime data center, and if not, we just move the users. Anyone using this scenario disaster recovery plan? No? I do have a few customers who used to do like that. They build actually their second data center in a second office location, where in worst case scenario, they could just move users from one location to the other. And then they were like on-premise users again. And then the IT guys and partners were restoring the other data center. And then the next working day, they say, hey, just drive to the next location because the systems are up and running again. Yeah, fine. I'm glad there's only one guy in the room using this as disaster recovery scenario. So with that, I think it's the right time today, during this session, to reconsider your disaster recovery plan. Why? I hope it's clear by my explanation that it's been challenging all way long. I've been working in IT for, let's say, close to 20 years, and it's been challenging for 20 years. I'm pretty sure that for some of you who've been working in IT for maybe 30 years, 40 years, it's been challenging for 40 years. Probably even more challenging than 20 years ago and even more challenging than today. But in the end, it's all about complexity. It's about planning, design, what will work, what about my application, and even sometimes vendor lock-in. What I mean by vendor lock-in is, think of the storage replication. You have vendor one replicating to a storage box from another vendor. Even more complex, right? Sometimes it's not even possible. Or even from the same vendor, storage solution one, moving to a larger box or a bigger one, or having new features within the same vendor, it's sometimes also pretty challenging. And then the last one, pretty expensive, always. So it's complexity, lock-in, and expensive. The three words where every IT manager goes crazy nowadays. Hey, my dear customer, I have the best solution for you. It's pretty complex to install, but that's okay. I'm a consultant. You can hire me for like 200 days a year at I don't know the average rate in Norway, but let's say in Belgium it's close to €1,000 for an experienced consultant. So that's 200K just for hiring me, and I'll do whatever I can do in your basement and having fun. And then the sales guy comes in and says, hey, but we have this new box and it's even bigger and more terabytes and more performant, but it's another 50, 60, 100, 500K if you want. The IT manager goes, can you please walk out that room as quick as possible? That's the IT manager, right? So why should you reconsider today? It's because we have public cloud solutions. It's probably one of those IT managers. Hey, it was just a joke for going outside the room. No. Commodity solutions are present today. They are working based on proven technology. Public cloud, I wouldn't say cheap, but cheaper, depending on your systems and your data center and so on. So now you can, again, walk into the IT manager's office saying, hey, we got the best solution. It's only taking a few days of work to implement it, not at 200 days anymore, just, let's say, 50 days, 50, depending on the size of your IT environment. We got plenty of options. Yes, we are using a few shared technologies. Hyper-V and Azure, you already know because of the title of my session. But it's not only Microsoft providing Azure services. They provide a platform and anybody can use it. As a partner, as a service provider, you can just do reselling. And then, again, to the IT manager and mainly the CFO in the room, it's not that expensive anymore. And in some cases, it's actually pretty cheap. But more on that later on. Now, to finalize the intro on disaster recovery, it's not having your monthly updates, reboots of your systems. It's only part of the solution. It's not only having backup. Who is doing restore testing on a regular basis? Okay, not that many. Why not? You're taking backups, right? So why not testing restores? What's the point of drinking beer if not getting drunk? Probably not the same logic, but you know what I mean. Although having backups, it helps. And the worst scenario I ever had for one of my customers. I can blame it on you if it's not working. Here's my backup tape. I don't know if there's anything on it, but it's my backup tape. And you have to make sure that you can restore my data. And then you insert the tape, and then it says, remove cleaning tape. Ah, damn it. You all know what I mean, right? It's not the first time. Yeah. So that's disaster recovery. Next step, Microsoft disaster recovery stack. Think of your most easy explanation of a data center. It's computing, server hardware. It's storage in whatever way and whatever size, it doesn't matter. And even what kind of storage, I don't care. And it's networking connection. And on top of that, you have your servers, mostly hypervisors. I know we're still using physical machines and probably some good reasons for that one, but not that important. And on top of the data center layer, we have our applications. Any application, again, I don't care. And then think a few slides back. The best solution we had for quite a lot of years is third-party storage replication. And then based on the hypervisor, again, we're talking about mainly Hyper-V for the moment, it's Hyper-V replica. For the ones who don't know what Hyper-V replica is, I have a few slides on that one. And then the application, which, depending again on the application itself, can also allow for disaster recovery. Think of an Exchange cluster, database availability groups, one Exchange server on one side, one Exchange server on the other side, and they are just replicating the database. Even two-way replication is possible. If one of your servers in the left data center goes down, you have an exact, up-to-date, active running copy on the right side. But that's all out of the application. And then, putting it all together, we have the hypervisor, we have our applications, and we have public cloud Azure. Two main topics I'm going to talk about the rest of the session is Hyper-V replica, just a few slides because I assume all of you know what Hyper-V replica is, besides the ones who are still using VMware. And we all know that they're jealous about Hyper-V replica. And the next one is Azure Site Recovery Manager. But starting with backups. Why? Because that's where it starts. And it's oh so easy. Other wordings, not that important, but just giving you the full picture. We have Hyper-V failover clustering. Installing two physical machines, Hyper-V, we create them in a Windows cluster, and we have some kind of high availability. Is that disaster recovery? Nah, it depends. It depends, for example, if you're running one single VM, the VM will fail over to the other Hyper-V node, but what if there's something wrong inside your application? Single SQL server, it fails over to the other side. But if someone is actually doing maintenance on the database itself and deleting some tables that he's not supposed to delete, yeah, it's fine if you have a cluster, but your database will be screwed anyway. So that's not the full disaster recovery. So next to that, we have Hyper-V guest clustering. Clustering inside your application, like SQL always on, like Exchange availability groups I already mentioned. And then we have backups. Maybe centralized backups in Data Protection Manager or whatever enterprise-oriented backup solution you're using. And then, for example, we can integrate with Azure Backup. More on that later on. Actually using Azure as a backup location. Storing my data away from my data center. That's the main idea for the moment. And then to make it a bit more enterprise-oriented, thinking about, yeah, but you're only talking about Microsoft stuff, you're only talking about Hyper-V, but I'm running Hyper-V for my test environment and running VMware for my production environment. So your solution doesn't work anymore because you're only talking about Hyper-V. Now just know for the moment that the Azure Site Recovery Manager can help you even if you have VMware systems running. You just need a bit more system-centered components, like Virtual Machine Manager, like some third-party plugins. But just for the moment, stick to the fact that it's working. Now the first one, Azure Backup. Think of backup as, I want to make sure that a copy of my data is somewhere stored on a medium. The typical medium in the past was tape drives. But we all know that a cleaning tape is not a backup tape, so we try to move away from that one. So the next backup medium was backup to disk. And then in most scenarios, it's backup to disk and then offloading to tape because we want to make sure that the tapes are offsite. In the secretary's home or on a remote location, I don't care. But in the end, backup to disk is pretty cheap. And then we have Azure Backup. Think of Azure Backup. For the ones who are working with Azure, it's a collection of different tools, different features, where backup is only one of them. And it's one of the easiest ones to use and one of the cheapest ones to use. Now, what is Azure Backup? The main Azure Backup is used for offloading files and folders. Think of, we have our on-premise servers, a file server. You install an Azure Backup agent on that machine, and then it's copying, replicating data to Azure. 500 gigs, 1 terabyte, 4 terabytes, I don't care. Using Azure as your next backup location. Just using storage, which is awfully cheap in Azure, by the way. Then there's also backup to Azure. Now, the backup to Azure is not an official term. That's my term. Microsoft only talks about Azure Backup. But a typical Azure Backup as a feature within your file server, it's only backing up files and folders. The way I call backup to Azure is by using some additional configuration. It's creating a secured storage location inside the Azure data center, and then offloading full system backups. So that's the second option. But just for you to make it clear, it's or I'm copying, backing up folders, or I'm backing up full system. But in the end, it's the same Azure backend, it's the same Azure secured location where you store your data. And then when to choose your backup to Azure. Why should I step away from my USB drives, my NAS boxes? Because it's available. Now think of System Center Data Protection Manager. Or again, any other third-party backup solution. Think of Veeam, HP Data Protector, and all the other ones. I mean, enterprise-oriented backups, like a centralized backup server, who is backing up all different servers. On-premise, even remote if you want. That's what I mean by any third-party enterprise location. As long as your backup solution can integrate with a backup to disk, you can use Azure Backup. Just think that your disk backup is just some virtual disk inside the Azure data center. Then you think, yeah, but I'm running an SMB, or I do have a few remote sites. Should I install DPM or any other third-party solution? No, you can use the built-in Windows backup tool in Server 2012 or R2, of course. Any backup to disk is backup to Azure. It's almost the same. So how does it work? Pretty easy, and I'll show you later on a live machine how it's working. But the configuration, it's pretty easy. It's not even taking 5 minutes. You connect to Azure, first of all, quite obvious, you need your Azure subscription. Second, you do some configuration on Azure, creating your secured backup vault. The backup vault is a secured location, encrypting data. Backup to disk, is it always encrypted? Backup to a USB drive, is that one encrypted? It depends, but I would say no, it's not. So within Azure, you log on, you create your credentials, you create your secured vault, then you download an agent, you install that agent on your Windows server if it's a standalone machine, you register, just entering your Azure credentials, and it starts uploading data. 500 gigs, 4 terabytes, I don't care. Just know that if it's quite a lot of data that needs to be uploaded for the first time, Since a few months, you can also use the human handling. Human handling meaning you use your backup to disk system, your NAS box, you give it to someone within Microsoft Offices, and he makes sure that it's been driven over to the closest Azure data center, which for us I think is Amsterdam and Dublin. And then someone within the Microsoft data center does an offload of your USB drives, NAS boxes, whatever, on your Azure tenant. And as of that moment, it's only synchronizing the updates. And of course, restores are just happening in the same way. The same story goes for DPM or, again, any other third-party product you're using that is capable of doing backup to disk. It's again downloading, creating the vault, downloading the agent, installing it on your backup server. So not on all individual Hyper-V machines, only on your backup server. And then the backup server, again in the scenario of DPM, it's actually recognizing all your remote systems. But again, if you're using Veeam, HP Data Protector and all the other ones, yeah, they're just using agents for pulling data remote from your remote server, storing it on the backup server, and then the backup server is copying it on the disk, which in this case, again, is an Azure disk. Now, quite important restores, of course, is security. Where is security built in? Because why is security important? Because it's a public cloud. Who's not a fan of a public cloud because it's not secure? You really dare to say that? Really? Make sure at the end of my session you come up front and you get one of my t-shirts. Thank you for that. Which is actually, by the way, it's a good point. Public cloud and security, there might be some concerns. I could talk more than a day about why Microsoft Azure is a very secure platform. If you're really interested, it's a 700-page PDF. So feel free to download and read it. So it's not only in the agent, it's not only in Azure. So the first step is creating your Azure Vault. It's creating a secured location, downloading an encryption key, installing that encryption key on your backup server, and then all traffic, all backup data going back and forth, doing backups or doing restores, is also encrypted data. Because a typical connection is just using internet, right? By the way, this all works without a VPN connection. The replication itself is just using HTTPS and SSL certificates and the encryption vault. And not even Microsoft is storing your encryption keys. So that's pretty important that you download the encryption key and you store it. It's like your backup service account password, but a bit more secure than just a password. Ready for the first demo? Just going to do a quick walkthrough of my system to make sure that I can show you some other important stuff. Okay. As long as you allow me to sign in again, then it's fine for me. So I created an Azure subscription, and then creating a secure vault. I'm not going to walk through the full configuration again, but just showing you that the vault is there. Who has never seen Azure before? Okay, good. Well, it's not good, but any specific reasons for that? No? You can try it out, all features for free for 1 month. Yeah, that's good. Just give it a try. Well, the free trial is giving you 75 euro credit. I don't know how many krona that is. You probably know what 75 euro means in your... and you can play with all features. Creating a backup vault, creating a couple of virtual machines, creating Active Directory integration, rights management. It's all there. Why is it taking so long? Maybe I have to try to log on again. But nope. Da-da-da. the downside of cloud. I'm just going to kill it and try again. Microsoft is migrating away from the initial portal, the ones who is taking some time to load, to the new one, who was here pretty fast. But most options are still in the old one. So I hope it gets through. Otherwise, I just continue and then I try again later on. I'm going to continue for the moment. Just hoping that it comes back. I'm just showing you that within the Windows backup tool that I'm using, I actually have a built-in functionality Azure backup. Hyper-V Replica, who does know Hyper-V Replica? Because I need to make sure that I can catch up on time. Okay. I only have 2 slides on that one, so the ones who don't know Hyper-V Replica probably know vMotion out of VMware, because otherwise you're still using a physical platform, which I hope you're not. So what is Hyper-V Replica? Pretty easy. It's having Hyper-V boxes on one side, your primary data center, and you're replicating data to a second data center. Now, replicating data means I'm copying my VHD file. So for the ones who are familiar with VMware, your VMDK, but in the Microsoft way, in an offline mode. So you have your VHD stored on the other side, but it's not a running VM. Although the Hyper-V disk by itself is kept up and running to make sure that all the bits and bytes that are being replicated are actually good bits and bytes. To make sure that whenever you want to fire up the copied VM on the other side, that it's actually capable of starting up. That was the first part. Existed since Hyper-V 2008, 6 years ago. And it's still working, it's optimized, and it's easier to configure, and so on and so on. Now, since 2012 R2, it also allows you to copy to a third site. Again, it's original data center site 1, creating a replica to a second data center, and then again from data center 1, creating a second copy to another data center. So it's like one source and 2 copies. I think that's pretty good disaster recovery, because your data center 1 can blow up. Data center 2 is available. And what if something is wrong with data center 2? Because in some locations, data center 1 and 2 is just the other side of the office building. I mean, if an airplane crashes on your building, you'll be screwed anyway. So you take a secondary site and even a third one. Where, for example, the third one could be Azure. How does it work? Hyper-V Replica within your Hyper-V Manager. Think of your vCenter console, but in Microsoft terms. Hyper-V Manager, right-click on the host, enable Hyper-V Replica, putting the flags for which VMs you want to replicate, and done. To second site, to the third site. It's that easy. Of course, if the second site needs to be Hyper-V servers up and running, but that's pretty obvious. That's Hyper-V Replica. If you have more questions on Hyper-V Replica, I have the rest of the afternoon to prep my session for tomorrow, but I'm happy to answer your questions on that one. The last one is Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery used to be Azure Recovery Manager. It's been rebranded a couple of months ago, I think somewhere September, October last year. But think of Azure Recovery Manager. What is it? It's a manager. It's an automated system. That's a manager. Not the IT manager or the finance manager. That's not an automated system. It's a manager, a mechanism helping you in automating disaster recovery. So initially, what did it do? Just managing failovers, like a control center. Some application, the Hyper-V Recovery Manager, was running in Azure as a service. That's it. An application, you log on to Azure, you pay your subscription, you activate the the Azure Recovery Manager, and everything else was controlling the failover between your data centers. If they were running Hyper-V, if they were running Virtual Machine Manager. What's been optimized in the Azure site recovery today, first of all, is it's not only a manager. Yes, it's still a manager. It's not only virtual machine manager dependency anymore. It can connect directly to a Hyper-V host, meaning it saves you a few €1,000 because you don't need to buy system center licenses. Again, in an SMB, think of 2 Hyper-V servers, physical machines, having Hyper-V replica in the same data center, and then needing to buy virtual machine manager, actually full system center, because it's only one of the components, but you need to pay for everything. Depending on your setup, it's close to €4,000 up to €25,000. So now with the new version, you can connect directly using the site recovery manager, still talking about the control mechanism, directly to Hyper-V standalone hosts. And then the last one, and this is really, really cool. It's not only a manager anymore, it's not only the Azure control system, but you can use Azure as your secondary site. Think again, your primary site, your data center, your customer's data center, I don't care, and replicating data from that data center into Azure. Why? Because Azure is a collection of data center systems, hypervisor, virtual machines, storage, backup vault, and everything else. So you don't need a second data center anymore. How do you deploy it? First of all, still using it as a manager. It still works today. It only costs you €200 and €40 per VM. What's an average number of VMs you have in your environment, customer environment? 50, 100? Let's say 100. Everybody agrees it's a typical Norwegian data center environment? Okay, 100 VMs, that's €4,000, plus 200 for the manager. Anyone else having a full data center disaster recovery offering for not even €5,000? Anyone? Yeah, I do, because I'm talking about it. On-premise, secondary site, and to Azure. And, I forgot, it's not only Azure as out of Microsoft. It's also using some service providers. Actually, IT, Microsoft partners, Microsoft certified companies, who are actually allowed to resell the Azure disaster recovery mechanism. So maybe one of your partners in Norway is already a certified one. There's a list on the Microsoft Azure website. I think the latest number is close to 80 worldwide. Think of the prime data center companies in Belgium. It's Belgacom and Colt and Interaction. Not even if you know the names, but that's within Belgium, our prime data center hosting companies. And they felt like, but we're losing business to Microsoft. So instead of continue to compete with them, we might just hook up with them. So they are now providing Azure disaster recovery services. And again, quite important, and then I'm going to move over to the last demo. Hyper-V, virtual machine manager, if you have it running, 2012 R2, pretty fine. If not, it can communicate directly with your Hyper-V boxes. And then, of course, disaster recovery is working. Now, to make sure that I can show you how easy it is to configure, I'm using screenshots, and if I have some time left and the Azure portal is up and running again, I can show you the real-life screens. How long does it take in real life? How long did the session take? 60 minutes, right? Anyone remember the topic? Using Azure site recovery in 60 minutes? Doing the full configuration with all the screenshots I'm going to walk you through, it's taking close to 60 minutes. And I'm not joking. You already know how it worked for the Azure backup. It's exactly the same way. You create your Azure subscription. You create your site recovery vault. Again, a secured location where you store your disaster recovery data. And everything else is just following a wizard. So this is just a screenshot. I have more of them later on. Then you download the Azure Site Recovery software plugin on your machines, Hyper-V boxes. Here it still says Virtual Machine Manager, but you already know that you can use Hyper-V as well. Installing the agent, it's uploading some metadata, Hyper-V information, virtual machine information back to Azure, and then you start creating protection groups. Protection groups meaning, what VMs do I need to replicate to Azure? Maybe you have 100 VMs, but only 50 of them need to be high available, need to be inside your disaster recovery solution. I don't care about a test box. I don't care about a Windows 8 client just for testing. I'm only using it for production disaster recovery. So it's not all or nothing. It's up to you to decide. And even playing with the different protection groups based on how many times do you want to replicate updates. Imagine your customer has an SLA that his application can be down for 1 day. I mean, fine. The default setting within the Azure Site Recovery is 30 minutes, meaning the machine state is 30 minutes behind the production state. You might think, yeah, 30 minutes. Who cares about 30 minutes? I'm talking about a business-critical application. The lowest you can go is 5 seconds. Why 5 seconds? Because there's always some latency in talking with Azure, because it's just using a plain internet connection. Again, no VPN required. So they actually built in their own latency of 5 seconds. If it can go faster, it will go faster. But just know that the lowest replication setting you can define is 5 seconds. Next is just animation, so I don't care. So here we go. You log on to Azure by using your trial subscription. For example, it works. If not, you have your professional subscription. So the first thing you do is go into the portal, Recovery Services, and create your Site Recovery Vault. Ka-ching, €200. But you have your secured location. That's step one. The next step is a quick walkthrough wizard. And then you go to creating a Hyper-V site. Think of Hyper-V Replica. It's not exactly the same as Hyper-V Replica, but it's creating a Hyper-V Replica lookalike. That's the first step. So you press on Create Hyper-V Site. You give it a name, NIC Recovery Site, of course. And then it's creating the secured vault. Secured vault key is your encryption data. This key is being used for all communication between your Hyper-V present on-prem systems, between your virtual machine manager, if you're using them, and then doing the communication between Azure and your data center. The next step is creating a storage location. Why? Because you need storage for or backups, or in this situation, running virtual machines. Next step is creating a network. Why? Because your VM doesn't run if it doesn't find a networking connection. Inside the networking connection, you can define your IP subnets. In my situation, it's a 10 dot something. Providing the maximum VM count, which by default is 4,000. And then the rest is just your tenant information. The next step, think of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. The next step is downloading the Azure Site Recovery Provider, an MSI file you download it on your Hyper-V box, and you start the setup. First thing it asks is running Windows updates. I encourage you, if you want to test it out, make sure that you run Windows updates. Why? Because the Azure Site Recovery Provider has been updated like 7 times in 2 weeks. Why? Because it's buggy? No, because it's adding new features. The 5 seconds didn't exist a few weeks ago, but now it does. So it's actually forcing you to install the newest update. Update is installed, and then it says continue to register the server. So you log on to the Azure portal again. Then even asking you for the internet connection. So even if you're behind the proxy, it will work, no worries. And then it asks you for the Site Recovery Vault key. This is the encrypted data that he needs to connect back to Azure. And that's it. Then we're back in the Azure portal, and we create a protection group. So the protection group is a collection of servers that will use this specific recovery mechanism. Think of replicating 5 seconds or 30 minutes, or think of these 20 VMs need to be part of the recovery group, but the other 50 don't. That's the purpose of the protection group. Specifying some settings, copy frequency I already mentioned. Retain recovery points, think of snapshots. How many snapshots do you want me to store? The frequency of application consistent snapshots. Think of VSS engine, think of SQL, Exchange, SharePoint, and any other application you're using that is VSS aware. It will be VSS aware inside Azure as well. And then the initial replication. Yes, a question.
Can you have a VSS agent on more than one VM in a protection group?
Can you have a VSS agent?
Going across multiple VMs in the same protection group?
Why would you do that?
I'm just thinking aloud. If you've got dependent applications. So if I want to snap this application and this application is independent, could you do that?
Well, it's just relying on the Windows VSS engine. So think of a server 2008, which is using the 2008 version of the VSS engine, and a 2012, and then an R2. Yeah, and they can all be part of the same protection group. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, good. By the way, you just won yourself a T-shirt. Now I have only 2 left, so make sure you keep the questions coming. So the next step is we have our protection group, define the overall replication settings for that group, and the next step is what virtual machine needs to be part of this protection group. And that's about it. The last step is the source, target, and a name. Where does my Azure Site Recovery needs to place my VMs? Because even there you can play with some settings. You can replicate one VM into one protection group, and then maybe creating a second protection group with the same VM, having different settings to a different backend storage inside Azure. I have no idea why you should do that for the moment, but just know that it's possible. Then selecting your VMs, pretty easy. Creating your network settings. I haven't done this in this screenshot, but not that important. Now, what's important with a virtual network? It's making sure that once your VM is being replicated, it will be up and running anyway, like in sleeping mode, and it needs an IP address. Now, by configuring the virtual network settings inside your site recovery, you can actually fool the system by replacing IP addresses. Think of a 192 segment in your production data center. And then inside Azure, you create a 10 dot something. And then you can just fool your system. So if it's failing over, it's doing the Hyper-V replica. It's actually taking over the IP setting from the left side. And then by using the integration with site recovery, it's just updating the IP address to something else. Meaning, whenever you have to start up that machine, in background, it's running the 10 point something, but it's exposing itself as a 192. So no IP hassle, no local scripts you need to run, nothing. That's the purpose. And then you create your recovery plan. A recovery plan is like a walkthrough scenario. Whenever I'm thinking of Azure Site Recovery tells me I need to force a failover, this is what you have to do. For example, like this screenshot just for testing, forcing a full group shutdown. Think of, I have 5 Exchange servers. I want to make sure that, for example, 4 of them are always shutting down at the same state because they're database servers and my client access servers. And then there's one standalone, which is outside of that protection group. So you got quite a lot of different options there. Even pretty cool is doing a test failover. It's actually doing the full sequence, and I just took a screenshot like halfway through. It's doing a full test failover. First possible scenario is by creating a test VM. It's creating a VM on one side, replicating the VM to the other side, and doing some testing, communication like an RDP session, like a ping, and you know, the basic testing. Even by using your production systems, it can do a test failover. Now, why is that important? Think of my question like 50 minutes ago. Who is doing backups? Yeah, everybody's doing backups. Who's doing restore testing? Well, like 30% of the room. This is your recovery testing. You don't want to find out that your Hyper-V replica screwed it up the moment you have to do the recovery. We all agree, right? So this is your test failover. With that, I got like 5 minutes left because we started 4 minutes late. And it's still doing crazy. Just gonna kill my browser session because I tried a refresh, and that might just be the easy solution. Trying to log on again. It's like entering Star Wars. So the first portal is pretty quick. Let's hope the second one is getting through as well. Any other questions in the meantime? I mean, there's nothing fancy about it. Oh, there it is. So my solution worked. Okay. Any questions? No? Good. Then I'll just quickly go through because, yeah, you know, it's just a screenshot, and who believes a screenshot, right? So we go into recovery services, NIC Vault. I showed you it's a walkthrough wizard, and indeed it's a walkthrough wizard. So create a Hyper-V site, new NIC site. It will take a couple of seconds, not that important. Again, so I downloaded the agent yesterday for doing my final testing. And in the meantime, there's already a new agent, but this time for virtual machine as a backend. I don't care because I'm running just plain Hyper-V, but that's what I mean by continuous improvements. Within my NIC Vault, the one I prepared, I got my protected items, which is a group. And inside that group, I have my virtual machines. So just a VM, and I'll show you. On my Hyper-V box, where, come on, you can do it. This is my just a VM. So I have my standalone Hyper-V box, installed the agent, and I'll prove you that my agent is installed. It's the Azure Site Recovery Configurator. This one you've seen in the screenshot. Give me my encryption key, if I remember my location. Yeah, I already downloaded. Yeah, pretty good. Because it's already configured. But that's the next finish walkthrough. Next to that, it's talking again to Azure. So I'm switching back to Azure. And I can see the state of my VM. So for the moment, on-premise, I have a machine that's called just a VM. It's running Windows. It's having 1 CPU, 2 gigs of RAM. It's part of that recovery group. And that's about it. And inside Azure, my Hyper-V replica, I have my second VM, which in this case is also using the name just a VM, but I can just give it another name, like just a VM DR. But then again, you're back to the challenges we have with DNS and everything. But you can just use the same name. And then you can also play with machine settings. So think of, in this scenario, it's pretty easy, but think of your on-premise server, a SQL Server backend having 8 cores, 64 gigs of RAM. That's a typical SQL server, right? But maybe in disaster recovery, you don't need that performance server. You can rely on 2 CPUs and maybe 16 gigs of RAM. Because in the end, we're running a disaster recovery scenario, sending 60% of our users home, and then the other 40% needs to continue working. Just an example. And everything else stays the same. Oops. That was one too many. And then the next one is recovery plans. I didn't create them, making sure that you can go to lunch on time, but you've seen the screenshot. It's just a next wizard, and that's it. Easy as that. I just have a few slides left, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, if it's, there it is. the masterpiece question. I talked about complexity, talked about vendor lock-in, and talked about cost. What does it cost? This is only mentioning the price of the storage. The first 5 gigs is free. Well, I don't care. I don't run a production system running 5 gigs of storage. Anyone? Yeah, maybe the MP3 player from your kids, but anything else is 25 euro cent per gigabyte. A typical storage environment in Norway, 4 gigs. No? 6 gigs, 8 gigs, any number? Come on, an easy one, it's lunchtime. 10 terabyte of storage. That will cost you? Come on, come on, come on. Anyone? Taking up your cell phone, starting calculator? It's 250 euro a month. Any storage vendors in the room? Thank God, otherwise I would be killed by now. Last couple, only just giving you, talked about replication on storage level. Think of Azure Site Recovery, the old version, only doing the control mechanism. Second one, the one I walked you through by using the screenshots, is actually using Azure as a disaster recovery data center. Next one, going live 2-3 months ago, is using SAN replication. Think of your vendor lock-in, it's not there anymore. I don't care what kind of storage box you're using on-prem. We're going to make sure that we have plugins, and we're going to replicate on storage level. So directly, not on VM level anymore, but directly on storage level. Oh, there was one slide missing, just with the list of the brands, but HP is in there, NetApp is in there, IBM is in there, Hitachi is in there, Fujitsu is in there, Dell is in there, EMC is in there. Any brand I missed? I think I got most of them. So to wrap up, I started with what is disaster recovery. Then we talked about how can Microsoft solutions help you. Think about Hyper-V Replica, think about Azure. And then a bit more Azure Site Recovery Manager. I'm still Peter de Tender. You can find me on Twitter. It's PDTIT. I thank you for being here. Got one last slide. It's about the same topic. It's using Azure Site Recovery Manager, but more from the system center point of view. So my fellow Robert Hedblom, you're all familiar with Robert Hedblom, I assume. I think he's or Norwegian or Swedish, I'm not sure. He's a master on System Center. He's going to talk about the same topic, but more in the automation, more about how to integrate with System Center, like DPM, how to force DPM backups into Azure, how to replicate systems, how to do automation by using Orchestrator, by using Service Manager for getting feedback about creating tickets and everything. So it's like Azure Site Recovery, the optimized session, by using System Center, which I didn't really talk about that much. With that, thank you very much. I hope you liked it. I have 2 T-shirts left, so feel free to grab them. Thank you. And